The morning sun cast long shadows across the stone courtyard of Kensington Palace as Catherine, Princess of Wales, stood before her bedroom mirror, her reflection showing the weight of sleepless nights. Dark circles beneath her usually bright eyes told the story of weeks filled with difficult conversations, medical appointments, and the crushing reality that had become her new normal. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the pearl necklace that had belonged to Princess Diana, a piece of jewelry that had come to symbolize strength through adversity. William entered the room quietly, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. He had been awake since dawn, pacing the corridors of their private apartments, grappling with emotions he had never imagined facing again. The last time he had felt this helpless was when he was a young boy, watching his mother disappear from his life forever. Now, as a husband and father, he was confronting another devastating possibility that threatened to shatter the carefully constructed stability of his adult life. The diagnosis had come 3 weeks earlier, delivered in the sterile environment of a private medical facility in London. Catherine had insisted on hearing the news alone first, a decision that had both frustrated and impressed William. Her strength in that moment, sitting across from the oncologist as he explained the nature of her condition, had been remarkable. She had asked the practical questions, taken notes, and maintained her composure until she reached the car where William waited. Only then, in the privacy of their vehicle, had she allowed herself to break down. The children knew something was different. 9-year-old George had become unusually quiet during family meals, his perceptive nature picking up on the hushed conversations between his parents. Charlotte, with her spirited personality, had been asking why Mama seemed sad, her innocent questions cutting straight to the heart of Catherine's struggle to maintain normalcy. Little Louis, still too young to fully understand, continued his cheerful chatter, providing moments of lightness that both parents desperately needed. The palace staff had been informed on a need-to-know basis. Sir Clive Alderton, the principal private secretary, had worked closely with the communications team to prepare for what would inevitably become a public announcement. Every detail had been considered, from the timing of the release to the specific wording that would convey the seriousness of the situation while maintaining appropriate privacy boundaries. The challenge was enormous: how to share such personal news with a world that felt entitled to know everything about their lives. Catherine had spent hours writing and rewriting the statement that would eventually reach millions of people. Each word was carefully chosen, each sentence crafted to strike the right balance between honesty and hope. She wanted to acknowledge the reality of her situation without causing unnecessary alarm, to share her vulnerability while projecting the strength that people had come to associate with her public persona. The statement would need to serve multiple purposes: informing the public, setting boundaries for privacy, and beginning what would undoubtedly be a very public journey through treatment and recovery. William watched his wife with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. The woman who had seamlessly transitioned from a middle-class upbringing to royal life was now facing perhaps her greatest challenge. He remembered their early days together at the University of St. Andrews, when Catherine was simply Kate Middleton, a fellow student with an infectious laugh and an ability to ground him in ways he had never experienced. Those carefree days seemed like a lifetime ago, yet the essence of the woman he had fallen in love with remained unchanged. The couple had always prided themselves on their partnership, their ability to support each other through the unique pressures of royal life. They had weathered media storms, navigated complex family dynamics, and balanced public duties with private desires for normalcy. This challenge, however, was different. It was deeply personal, unpredictable, and completely beyond their control. The protective instincts that had served them well in other situations felt inadequate against an invisible enemy that threatened not just Catherine's health, but the very foundation of their family life. Their medical team had outlined a comprehensive treatment plan that would require Catherine to step back from most of her public engagements. The woman who had thrown herself into royal duties with characteristic dedication would need to prioritize her health above all else. This adjustment was particularly difficult for someone who had built her royal identity around service and commitment to various causes. Her patronages, from early childhood development to mental health advocacy, would need to continue without her direct involvement, at least temporarily. The practical implications were staggering. Royal tours would need to be postponed or cancelled. High-profile events that had been planned months in advance would require last-minute adjustments. The careful choreography of royal life, with its precise scheduling and public expectations, would need to be completely reimagined. William would need to shoulder additional responsibilities while maintaining his own mental health and being present for his wife and children. Behind closed doors, the couple had engaged in conversations that tested the very core of their relationship. Catherine had insisted that William should not put his own life on hold, that the monarchy required him to continue his work regardless of her condition. William had struggled with this expectation, torn between duty to the crown and devotion to his family. Their marriage, already strong, was being tested in ways they had never anticipated. The children's routines had been carefully maintained despite the upheaval. George continued his studies at Lambrook School, where teachers had been discreetly informed about the family situation. Charlotte's dance classes and Louis's nursery activities proceeded as normal, providing stability amid uncertainty. Both parents were determined that their children should feel secure and loved, even as their own world felt anything but stable. Catherine had begun working with a therapist who specialized in helping patients and families navigate serious medical diagnoses. These sessions provided a safe space to explore fears, process emotions, and develop coping strategies for the journey ahead. The therapy was also helping her prepare for the intense public scrutiny that would accompany any announcement of her condition. The royal household had quietly begun making adjustments to accommodate Catherine's changing needs. Apartments were being modified to ensure comfort during treatment periods. Staff schedules were being revised to provide additional support while maintaining the family's privacy. Every detail was being considered to create an environment that would promote healing while allowing the family to function as normally as possible. William had reached out to his brother Harry, despite their ongoing estrangement. The phone call had been awkward and emotional, with both brothers struggling to navigate their complicated relationship while facing a family crisis. Harry had immediately offered to return to the UK, an offer that had been politely declined but deeply appreciated. The conversation had reminded both men of what truly mattered, beyond the public feuds and media narratives that had dominated their recent interactions. The Princess of Wales had also been in close contact with her own family. Carol and Michael Middleton had been pillars of strength, offering practical support and emotional comfort in their characteristic understated way. The tight-knit Middleton family, which had always prized privacy and normalcy, was now facing the unique challenge of supporting their daughter through a very public health crisis. As the date for the public announcement approached, Catherine found herself reflecting on the unexpected turns her life had taken. From a relatively ordinary childhood in Bucklebury to becoming one of the most photographed women in the world, each phase of her journey had required adaptation and growth. This latest challenge would demand everything she had learned about resilience, dignity, and grace under pressure. The medical team had been cautiously optimistic about her prognosis, but had also been honest about the uncertainties ahead. Treatment would be aggressive, and the side effects would be significant. There would be good days and difficult days, periods of hope and moments of despair. The journey would test not only her physical strength but also her mental and emotional resilience. William had been researching everything he could about her condition, reading medical journals and consulting with experts to better understand what lay ahead. His analytical nature, which sometimes frustrated Catherine in lighter moments, was now channeled into becoming the most informed advocate possible for his wife's care. He had compiled lists of questions for medical appointments and had begun networking with other families who had faced similar challenges. The palace press office had been working around the clock to prepare for the media response to any announcement. Photographers would undoubtedly stake out every location the family frequented. Tabloid speculation would run rampant. Social media would explode with both support and criticism, as seemed to happen with every aspect of royal life. The challenge would be maintaining some semblance of privacy while acknowledging the public's genuine concern and affection for the Princess of Wales. Catherine had made the decision to personally inform the Queen before any public announcement. The visit to Windsor Castle had been emotional, with Her Majesty offering both practical support and personal understanding born from decades of facing public scrutiny during private difficulties. The Queen's immediate response had been to ask what the family needed, rather than expressing concern about the implications for the monarchy. This reaction had meant more to Catherine than any formal statement of support could have conveyed. The couple had also spent considerable time discussing how to explain the situation to their children. Child psychologists had been consulted to ensure that George, Charlotte, and Louis received age-appropriate information that would help them understand and cope with their mother's illness. The goal was to be honest without being frightening, to acknowledge the seriousness without destroying their sense of security. As the final preparations for the announcement were being made, Catherine and William found themselves drawing closer together than they had been in years. The crisis had stripped away the non-essential aspects of their lives, leaving only what truly mattered: their love for each other, their commitment to their children, and their determination to face whatever came next as a united family. The goodbye they would soon say to their previous life would indeed stir the world, but it would also mark the beginning of a journey that would test and ultimately strengthen everything they held dear. The camera crew arrived at Adelaide Cottage on a crisp March morning, their equipment carefully transported in unmarked vehicles to avoid attracting attention from the ever-present media. Catherine had specifically requested that the announcement be filmed at their private residence rather than in one of the formal palace settings. She wanted the message to feel personal and authentic, reflecting the intimate nature of what she was about to share with the world. The location chosen for filming was the garden area where the family often spent their quietest moments together. Ancient oak trees provided a natural backdrop, their bare branches just beginning to show the first hints of spring growth. The symbolism was not lost on Catherine. This was not just an ending, but potentially a new beginning, a season of renewal and hope despite the challenges ahead. William stood just outside the camera's view, his presence providing silent support as Catherine prepared to deliver the most difficult speech of her public life. She had practiced the words countless times, but now, facing the lens that would carry her message to millions of people around the world, the magnitude of the moment felt overwhelming. Her hands were steady, but her heart raced as she thought about the children at school, unaware that their private family struggle was about to become headline news across the globe. The makeup artist had worked carefully to ensure Catherine looked healthy and strong, using techniques that would convey vitality while remaining natural enough not to seem deceptive. Every detail of her appearance had been considered: the soft blue sweater that brought out her eyes, the simple jewelry that wouldn't distract from her words, the setting that felt both regal and accessible. The goal was to project calm strength while acknowledging the vulnerability of her situation. As the filming began, Catherine's voice remained steady despite the emotional weight of her words. She spoke directly to the camera, as if addressing each viewer personally, explaining that following major abdominal surgery, subsequent tests had revealed cancer was present. The clinical language could not mask the human reality behind the diagnosis, but she delivered the information with the composure that had become her trademark during years of public speaking. The most challenging part of the message was addressing her children's needs while speaking to a global audience. Catherine explained how she and William had taken time to process the diagnosis privately and to explain the situation to George, Charlotte, and Louis in a way that was appropriate for their ages. Her voice caught slightly as she spoke about reassuring her children, the maternal instinct to protect them from worry evident even in this carefully controlled setting. William watched as his wife displayed the same grace under pressure that had first attracted him to her during their university years. But now he could see beyond the public persona to the woman who had cried in his arms the night before, terrified not of death but of leaving her children without a mother. The juxtaposition between her private vulnerability and public strength was both heartbreaking and inspiring. The production team worked with unprecedented sensitivity, understanding that they were documenting one of the most significant moments in recent royal history. Every camera angle was carefully considered to ensure dignity while maintaining the intimate tone Catherine wanted to achieve. There were no multiple takes or elaborate setups. This was raw, honest communication that could not be manufactured or polished beyond its essential truth. As Catherine continued speaking, addressing her plans for treatment and her temporary withdrawal from public duties, the weight of what she was giving up became clear. Years of carefully built relationships with charities and causes would need to be maintained by others. International commitments would require rescheduling or cancellation. The woman who had become synonymous with hands-on royal engagement was stepping back at the height of her influence and effectiveness. The timing of the announcement had been carefully calculated to minimize disruption to the children's school day and to allow for coordinated communication with palace partners and charities. By the time the video was released, key stakeholders had been personally informed, ensuring that those who worked most closely with Catherine heard the news directly rather than through media reports. Behind the scenes, a comprehensive support network was already being activated. Catherine's medical team had coordinated with specialists internationally, ensuring access to the most advanced treatments available. The logistics of providing world-class healthcare while maintaining appropriate privacy and security were complex, involving coordination between medical professionals, palace staff, and security services. The children's school had been discreetly briefed about the situation, with counseling resources made available should any of the young royals need additional support. George, as the eldest and most aware of media attention, would likely face the greatest challenges in processing both his mother's illness and the public nature of their family's struggle. Teachers had been prepared to provide additional support while maintaining the normal routines that would help all three children feel secure. Within hours of the announcement, the response began pouring in from around the world. Messages of support arrived from heads of state, fellow cancer patients, medical professionals, and ordinary people who felt a personal connection to the royal family. The volume of communication was unprecedented, requiring additional staff to manage the influx while ensuring that the family's privacy remained protected during this vulnerable time. The announcement had immediate implications for the monarchy's public calendar. Events that had been planned months in advance suddenly required complete reimagining. William would need to take on additional responsibilities while other family members, including Princess Anne and the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, would increase their public engagements to maintain the Crown's visible presence in British public life. Catherine had insisted that her charities and patronages continue their important work without interruption. Detailed plans were developed to ensure continuity of her advocacy efforts, particularly in areas like early childhood development where she had invested years of personal research and relationship building. The Earthshot Prize, which had become a signature initiative for the couple, would continue with William taking a more prominent role while Catherine contributed behind the scenes as her health allowed. The medical treatment schedule would require careful coordination with family life and any remaining public commitments. Catherine had insisted on maintaining some level of involvement in decisions affecting her patronages, but recognized that her primary focus needed to be on recovery. The balance between staying engaged and prioritizing health would be an ongoing challenge throughout her treatment. International reactions to the announcement reflected Catherine's global status as both a royal figure and a relatable young mother. Leaders from across the Commonwealth expressed support, while cancer organizations worldwide highlighted the importance of public figures sharing their experiences to reduce stigma and encourage others to seek early detection and treatment. The media response was complex, ranging from respectful coverage of the announcement to inevitable speculation about implications for the royal family's future. Editors at major publications faced difficult decisions about how much coverage was appropriate, balancing public interest with respect for the family's privacy during a medical crisis. Guidelines were quickly established to prevent intrusive photography or harassment of the family during this period. William found himself thrust into an even more prominent public role at a time when his personal focus was entirely on supporting his wife and children. The Prince of Wales had always been comfortable with public duties, but the added pressure of representing the family while managing his own emotional response to his wife's diagnosis created unprecedented challenges. His public appearances would now be scrutinized not just for their content but for any signs of how he was coping with the family crisis. The couple's communication strategy emphasized transparency about the general situation while maintaining strict boundaries around medical details and treatment specifics. This approach reflected Catherine's desire to be honest with the public while protecting the aspects of her experience that needed to remain private. The balance would require constant adjustment as her treatment progressed and circumstances changed. Behind the public announcements and media management, the family was grappling with fundamental changes to their daily routines. Mealtimes, school pickups, bedtime stories, all the ordinary moments that make up family life, now carried additional weight as Catherine faced an uncertain future. William had become hyper-aware of these everyday interactions, treasuring conversations and activities that had previously been taken for granted. The announcement video would be viewed by hundreds of millions of people within days of its release, making it one of the most widely seen royal communications in history. Yet for Catherine and William, the most important audience had been the three young faces that greeted them when they returned home from filming. George, Charlotte, and Louis needed to see that despite everything changing around them, their parents' love and commitment remained constant. The weeks following the announcement would bring challenges no amount of royal training could have prepared them for. Public sympathy mixed with media scrutiny in ways that were both comforting and intrusive. Well-meaning advice from strangers combined with genuine offers of support from friends and family to create an overwhelming flood of communication that needed to be managed while Catherine focused on beginning her treatment. As the initial shock of going public with her diagnosis settled, Catherine began to understand that her illness would become part of her public legacy, whether she wanted it to or not. The way she handled this challenge would influence how future generations remembered her contribution to the monarchy and to British public life. This realization was both daunting and motivating, adding another layer of responsibility to an already complex situation. The transformation from private struggle to public journey was now complete. The goodbye that had stirred the world was not just an ending, but a transition into uncharted territory where personal strength would need to be demonstrated on the most public of stages. Catherine and William were no longer just facing a family crisis, they were carrying the hopes and fears of millions of people who saw their own vulnerabilities reflected in the royal family's unexpected humanity. The first treatment session took place in a private wing of the London clinic, where Catherine had undergone her initial surgery months earlier. The medical facility had been carefully chosen not only for its excellent reputation but also for its ability to provide the privacy and security required for treating a member of the royal family. William sat in the waiting area, his phone buzzing constantly with messages from well-wishers around the world, but his attention was entirely focused on the closed door behind which his wife was beginning the most challenging phase of her recovery journey. The chemotherapy protocol that had been designed specifically for Catherine's case represented the latest advances in cancer treatment. Her medical team, led by some of Britain's most respected oncologists, had consulted with specialists internationally to ensure she was receiving the most effective treatment possible. The irony was not lost on either Catherine or William that she had access to medical care that was beyond the reach of most people facing similar diagnoses, a reality that added another layer of complexity to their public discussion of her illness. Catherine had spent considerable time preparing for the physical and emotional challenges of treatment. She had consulted with other women who had undergone similar protocols, learning about practical strategies for managing side effects while maintaining some semblance of normal family life. These conversations had been both encouraging and sobering, providing realistic expectations about the months ahead while offering hope for successful treatment outcomes. The children's adjustment to their mother's illness had been remarkable in some ways and heartbreaking in others. George, with his serious nature and keen intelligence, had become almost protective of his mother, asking careful questions about her appointments and treatment schedule. Charlotte had responded with characteristic determination, announcing to her class that her mother was going to beat the bad cells and that everyone should send good thoughts. Louis, still young enough to live primarily in the present moment, continued his cheerful chatter while occasionally asking when Mama would feel better. William had taken on increased domestic responsibilities with characteristic thoroughness, learning to braid Charlotte's hair and helping Louis with his reading in ways that would have seemed unimaginable during their more formal royal upbringing. These everyday paternal tasks had become precious to him, representing both his commitment to maintaining normalcy for his children and his determination to ensure Catherine could focus entirely on her recovery without worrying about household logistics. The palace had developed sophisticated protocols for managing Catherine's treatment schedule alongside any remaining public commitments. Her diary, once filled with engagements planned months in advance, now revolved around medical appointments and recovery periods. The flexibility required was challenging for an institution built on tradition and precise scheduling, but the entire royal household had adapted to prioritize her health above all other considerations. Public reaction to Catherine's illness had revealed the depth of affection people felt for the Princess of Wales. Letters and cards arrived daily from around the world, sharing stories of personal battles with cancer and offering encouragement from fellow patients and survivors. The volume of correspondence was unprecedented, requiring additional staff to manage the influx while ensuring that the family could read representative samples of the messages without being overwhelmed. Catherine had been particularly moved by letters from children, many of whom had drawn pictures or written simple messages of support. These communications reminded her why she had been so drawn to work with young people throughout her royal career. Even during her treatment, she found herself thinking about how her experience might eventually be used to help other families facing similar challenges, particularly in terms of explaining serious illness to children in age-appropriate ways. The media landscape surrounding Catherine's illness had evolved in unexpected ways. While respecting the family's requests for privacy during treatment, journalists and photographers found themselves covering a more human side of the royal family than had been visible in previous generations. The traditional distance between the monarchy and the public was being reduced by shared vulnerability, creating new challenges and opportunities for royal communication. William had begun working with cancer organizations to better understand how Catherine's public discussion of her illness might be leveraged to promote awareness and early detection. The Prince of Wales was acutely aware that his wife's platform could potentially save lives by encouraging others to seek medical attention for concerning symptoms. This realization added a sense of purpose to their difficult journey, suggesting that their personal struggle might contribute to broader public health benefits. The logistical challenges of maintaining royal security during medical treatment had required coordination between multiple agencies. Catherine's protection team had worked closely with medical facilities to ensure her safety without disrupting the care of other patients. The complexity of these arrangements was a constant reminder of how different their experience was from that of ordinary families facing similar challenges. International expressions of support had come from unexpected quarters, with leaders who had previously had formal relationships with the royal family now reaching out with personal messages of encouragement. These communications had reinforced William and Catherine's understanding of the unique position they held in global public consciousness, carrying not just British hopes but international goodwill during their family crisis. Catherine's approach to treatment had been characteristically methodical and research-driven. She had read extensively about her condition, consulted with multiple specialists, and developed detailed questions for each medical appointment. This engagement with her own care had been both empowering and occasionally overwhelming, as she balanced her desire to be an informed patient with the need to trust her medical team's expertise. The side effects of treatment had been managed as effectively as possible, but Catherine still faced days when simple activities required enormous effort. On these difficult days, she found herself reflecting on the nature of public service and personal sacrifice in ways she had never previously considered. The gap between her public image as a vibrant, energetic royal and her private reality as a cancer patient receiving intensive treatment created cognitive dissonance that required ongoing psychological adjustment. William had become increasingly protective of their family time, carefully screening requests for appearances or meetings that might compromise Catherine's recovery schedule. His growing assertiveness in protecting his family's boundaries represented a significant shift from his previous approach to royal duties, where public service had traditionally taken precedence over personal considerations. This change had not gone unnoticed by palace staff or media observers, signaling a possible evolution in how the next generation of royals would balance public and private demands. The couple had begun working with child psychologists to help George, Charlotte, and Louis process their mother's illness in healthy ways. These sessions had revealed both the resilience of children and their sophisticated understanding of adult concerns. The children's questions and observations often provided insights that helped Catherine and William better understand their own emotional responses to the crisis. As treatment progressed, Catherine found herself forming unexpected connections with other patients at the medical facility. Despite the security protocols and privacy measures surrounding her care, she had managed to develop friendships with fellow cancer patients who appreciated her determination to be treated as normally as possible within the constraints of her public role. These relationships had become a source of strength and perspective during the most challenging phases of treatment. The seasonal transition from winter to spring had taken on special significance during Catherine's treatment period. Each sign of new growth in the gardens at their various residences served as a metaphor for hope and renewal. William had begun photographing these changes, creating a visual diary of their family's journey through the darkest period of their lives toward what they hoped would be brighter days ahead. Catherine's relationship with her own mortality had evolved throughout her treatment. The woman who had always approached challenges with optimism and determination now found herself confronting uncertainties that could not be resolved through effort or planning. This philosophical shift had influenced her perspective on everything from daily routines to long-term goals, creating a more mindful approach to time and relationships that surprised even those closest to her. The final phase of her initial treatment protocol was approaching, bringing both relief and anxiety about the next steps in her recovery journey. follow-up testing would determine the effectiveness of the interventions she had endured, providing data that would influence decisions about ongoing care and monitoring. The anticipation surrounding these results had created a state of suspended animation for the entire family, as they prepared for news that could either validate their hope or require them to consider more aggressive treatment options. Throughout the treatment period, Catherine had maintained her commitment to documenting her experience in ways that might eventually help others facing similar challenges. Her detailed journals captured not just the medical aspects of her journey but also the emotional and practical realities of being a public figure dealing with serious illness. These writings represented a potential legacy that could extend far beyond her recovery, offering insights that might guide future approaches to royal communication during personal crises. As the world watched and waited for updates on her progress, Catherine and William had discovered reserves of strength they had not known they possessed. Their marriage, already solid, had been tested and refined by circumstances they could never have anticipated. The goodbye they had said to their former life had indeed stirred the world, but it had also transformed them as individuals and as a couple in ways that would influence every aspect of their future roles as leaders of the monarchy. The morning of Catherine's final treatment session arrived with an unexpected sense of ceremony. 9 months after her initial diagnosis, the Princess of Wales sat in the same private medical facility where her journey had begun, but everything had changed. Her reflection in the mirror showed a woman who had been transformed not just physically by the rigors of treatment, but emotionally and spiritually by confronting her own mortality while maintaining her public responsibilities. The scarf she wore had become as much a symbol of her journey as any royal regalia, representing a battle fought largely away from public view but with global consequences. William stood beside her as they waited for the medical team to arrive, his hand finding hers with the natural ease of a partnership that had been tested by circumstances they could never have imagined. The man who had once worried about the ordinary pressures of royal life had discovered depths of strength and tenderness he had not known he possessed. His role had evolved from supportive spouse to primary caregiver, from public figure to private protector, from future king to present father managing an unprecedented family crisis. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, Catherine's lead oncologist, entered the treatment room with the quiet confidence that had characterized her approach throughout the princess's care. The medical team had become extended family over the months of treatment, their professional expertise balanced by genuine affection for a patient who had approached her illness with remarkable grace and determination. Today's session would mark not just the completion of a treatment protocol, but the transition to a new phase of monitoring and hope. The children had been prepared for this milestone day with careful attention to their emotional needs and developmental understanding. George, now 10 and carrying himself with increasing maturity, had created a calendar marking each treatment session, crossing off days with the dedication of someone who understood that progress sometimes came in small, measured steps. Charlotte had prepared a surprise for her mother's return home, enlisting the help of palace staff to create a celebration that would acknowledge the achievement without overshadowing the ongoing uncertainty about the future. Little Louis, now 5 and filled with the irrepressible energy that had sustained his family through the darkest months, had been practicing a song he wanted to sing for his mother when she completed her medicine time. His innocent perspective on the situation had often provided moments of lightness that helped the entire family maintain hope during the most challenging phases of treatment. As the final infusion began, Catherine found herself reflecting on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from her illness. The forced slowdown in her public schedule had allowed for deeper connections with her children, more intimate conversations with William, and a clearer understanding of what truly mattered in their lives. The woman who had once measured success in terms of public engagements and official recognition now found meaning in quiet moments and small victories that would never make headlines. The global response to her health journey had exceeded every expectation. Cancer organizations worldwide reported increased funding and volunteer participation, attributed directly to the public discussion of Catherine's illness. Early detection rates had improved measurably in several countries, suggesting that her openness about her diagnosis was already saving lives. The transformation of her personal struggle into a platform for public health awareness had provided additional meaning to the difficult months of treatment. Letters continued to arrive daily from around the world, but the tone had evolved from expressions of sympathy to sharing stories of hope and survival. Catherine had begun responding personally to selected correspondence, particularly from young mothers facing similar diagnoses. These communications had become a source of purpose during treatment, reminding her that her platform carried responsibilities that extended far beyond traditional royal duties. The palace communications team had documented her journey with unprecedented transparency while maintaining appropriate privacy boundaries. The careful balance between public accountability and personal space had required constant adjustment, but the approach had been largely successful in satisfying public interest while protecting the family's emotional well-being during the most vulnerable period of their lives. William had emerged from the experience as a changed man and future king. His prioritization of family over protocol had sent subtle but significant signals about how the monarchy might evolve under his eventual leadership. The Prince of Wales, who had once worried about disappointing expectations, was now confident in making decisions based on personal values rather than institutional pressures. The medical team had been cautiously optimistic about Catherine's response to treatment, but Dr. Mitchell had been careful to emphasize that recovery would be measured in years rather than months. Regular monitoring, lifestyle adjustments, and ongoing vigilance would become permanent parts of Catherine's routine. The woman who had once taken her health for granted would now live with constant awareness of her body's needs and limitations. As the final treatment session concluded, Catherine felt a complex mixture of relief, gratitude, and apprehension about the future. The completion of active treatment was a significant milestone, but she understood that true recovery would require ongoing commitment and patience. The next phase of her journey would involve gradually returning to public duties while maintaining the health routines that had become essential to her well-being. The children's adjustment to their mother's illness had been remarkable, but child psychologists had warned that the transition to normal life might bring its own challenges. George's protective instincts toward his mother would need to be balanced with age-appropriate independence. Charlotte's determined optimism would require ongoing support to prevent unrealistic expectations about recovery timelines. Louis's natural resilience would need nurturing to ensure he felt secure as the family's routines continued to evolve. Plans were already underway for Catherine's gradual return to public engagements, beginning with carefully selected events that would allow her to reconnect with causes close to her heart without overwhelming her recovery process. The early childhood development initiatives that had been her passion project would receive renewed attention, informed by her recent experiences with vulnerability and resilience. The international dimension of Catherine's illness had created unexpected diplomatic opportunities. Her personal correspondence with other public figures who had faced similar health challenges had strengthened relationships across traditional political boundaries. The shared experience of serious illness had created bonds that transcended formal diplomatic protocols, suggesting new possibilities for royal engagement on global health issues. Media coverage of Catherine's final treatment session was carefully managed to respect the family's privacy while acknowledging public interest in this milestone. The images released showed a woman who appeared tired but determined, surrounded by medical professionals who had become trusted allies in her fight for recovery. The visual narrative emphasized progress and hope while acknowledging the ongoing nature of her journey. The drive home from the medical facility felt different from the many previous trips Catherine and William had made over the past months. The weight of uncertainty that had characterized their approach to each treatment session was replaced by cautious optimism about the future. They spoke quietly about practical matters, adjusting schedules, planning family activities, considering which public engagements might be appropriate in the coming weeks. The children's reaction to their mother's return home that evening captured the complex emotions surrounding this transition. Joy at reaching this milestone mixed with ongoing concern about what came next. The family dinner that night was both celebration and normal Tuesday evening routine, reflecting their desire to acknowledge progress while maintaining the stability that had sustained them through the most difficult period of their lives. Catherine's first public statement following the completion of treatment was carefully crafted to acknowledge the support she had received while being realistic about the ongoing nature of her recovery. She expressed gratitude to the medical team, the royal household staff, and the global community that had sustained her family through their darkest months. The statement also emphasized her commitment to using her experience to advocate for cancer patients and their families in the future. The goodbye that had stirred the world 9 months earlier was now being transformed into a hello that carried different meaning. Catherine was returning to public life as a changed person, with deeper appreciation for ordinary moments and clearer understanding of her priorities. The illness that had threatened to diminish her influence had actually increased her relevance, creating new opportunities for meaningful impact on issues she cared about most deeply. As the family settled into their evening routine, William and Catherine found themselves planning not just for the immediate future but for the long-term implications of their experience. Their children would grow up with different understanding of vulnerability and strength. Their marriage had been tested and refined by circumstances beyond their control. Their approach to royal service would be informed by lessons learned during months of forced reflection and reassessment. The world that had watched and worried throughout Catherine's treatment journey now shared in the cautious celebration of this milestone. Her story had become intertwined with broader conversations about health, family, and the human capacity for resilience. The Princess of Wales who emerged from treatment was recognizably the same person who had announced her diagnosis months earlier, but she was also fundamentally transformed by the journey she had undertaken. The final chapter of this particular story was not an ending but a transition to whatever came next. Catherine and William faced the future with realistic optimism, understanding that their experience had prepared them for challenges they hoped never to face again while equipping them with wisdom that would influence every aspect of their continued service to the crown and country.